Recently I watched a few videos about the Australian military and someone recommended this video. It's Australia's involvement in World War II. So yeah, interested to see more about this. Obviously Australia is one of Britain's strongest allies, so I want to know more about the history of the Australian military, and this is a good point in history to learn about, something important. So yeah, tell me what you know about it, let's learn.
Fellow Australians, it is my melancholy duty to inform you officially that in consequence of a persistence by Germany in her invasion of Poland, Great Britain has declared war upon her, and that as a result, Australia is also at war.
Well, imagine actually hearing that live, like hearing that message, and then having to think about the ramifications, what's going to happen in the following years. It's like, you can't really put yourself in that position, man. It must have been so scary. But
this was the announcement broadcast across the country that marked the start of Australia's role in the Second World War. Back then, Australia was still part of the British Empire and strongly believed in supporting Britain. But the country wasn't really prepared for another war. The army only had around 3,000 soldiers. So the military set out to recruit a new expeditionary force to fight across land, sea and sky. There was also the Citizens' Military Forces, or militia, which was similar to today's Army Reserve. In 1942, the government made it compulsory for all men aged between 18 and 35 to join the CMF. Some would end up on the front lines. By the end of the Second World War, close to 1 million Aussies would serve. That included more than 5,000 Indigenous soldiers, who signed up to fight for a country that didn't yet count them as citizens. Women also played a much bigger role in the Second World War. For the first time, they were allowed to enlist in the armed forces. And by the end of the war, they were serving in all sorts of roles, from driving to manning anti-aircraft guns. Women also kept the economy going at home, taking on many of the jobs usually done by men. At first, many Australian soldiers were sent to fight in Europe, the Mediterranean and North Africa. But in 1941, the war got a lot closer to home. Japan, which was already at war with China, attacked British, Dutch and American territories in Asia and the Pacific. It had allied itself with Nazi Germany and had its own plans to control the whole Pacific region. Its armies swept across Southeast Asia, and many feared Australia would be next. After brief attacks on the city of Darwin and submarine attacks in Sydney and Newcastle, they began an invasion of New Guinea, which was an Australian territory at the time. The Japanese Navy wanted to take control of the capital Port Moresby by sea, but they were defeated by US and Australian forces in a major naval and aerial battle known as the Battle of the Coral Sea. Meanwhile, a force of 2,000 Japanese soldiers set out to take Port Moresby over land, trekking across a track we now know as Kokoda. They were met by a much smaller group of Australian soldiers who were trekking towards an airfield in the north, and the Battle of Kokoda began. It's remembered as one of the most difficult campaigns of the war. The soldiers, who were mostly young and inexperienced, battled not just the Japanese, but also the elements. The Kokoda track is tough. It's narrow, steep and muddy. The days were hot and the nights freezing. By the time they even encountered the Japanese, they would be exhausted. However, they persisted, and with help from local Papuan people and additional soldiers that were sent in, they were able to stop Japan from taking control.
Actually, I never knew about that one, embarrassingly enough. So that's actually, quite eye-opening to learn about that Kokoda. Tell me if you knew about that one as well. Yeah, just some of the things they're saying there, like 1 million soldiers taking part in World War II, man, by the end of World War II. Like, that's an unbelievably huge number. And being British, obviously, we just appreciate Australia's role in that, but you see them, Australians having to fight on pretty much every part of the world as well. Very challenging, obviously.
For the next 3 years, Australians continued to fight in the Pacific and in Europe and the Middle East. until the tide of war turned against the Nazis and then against Japan. By the end of the war, close to 30,000 Australians had died. Many more were injured physically and mentally.
Yeah, when you hear like when it started, there was only 3,000 was it? 3,000 soldiers, and then you hear the amount of dead, the amount of people ended up taking part. Then like going back to that message at the start, to think all that was to come.
Including the tens of thousands who spent time as prisoners of war. They and the country they left behind would be forever changed by the Second World War.
Yeah, interesting, very like concise little documentary there, showing you really how spread apart around the world Australians were fighting for the Allies. It's like, I guess every British person has to owe Australia so much gratitude for that support. Like, tell me what you know about that as well. Do you have any like family, like grandparents, male or female? You see like a lot of females had to work hard at home there as well. Interesting with the Indigenous population signing up as well, or being, I don't know if they were made to sign up, but it said that they weren't like, was it resident or citizens? So quite a great thing for them to do as well. Tell me what you know about this, tell me what you think about it. Thanks.